Welcome to Zdík's Palace, one of the most interesting parts of the Olomouc Archdiocesan Museum. You will visit the Gothic cloister, the chapel of Saint John the Baptist, the Romanesque Episcopal Palace, and the cloister garth. The Gothic cloisters were built during the reconstruction of the Cathedral of St. Wenceslas in the second third of the 14th century on the site of the former Bishop's Palace. On ground floor level, only two of the outer walls remain preserved, the northern wall and the western wall, which is only partially accessible. The cycle of murals in the northern part of the corridor depicts the Last Judgment, the Annunciation, the Adoration of the Magi, the Adoration of the Shepherds and the two epitaphs of the canons of Olomouc. In the eastern part we can find the Crucifixion, Lamentation, Resurrection and Pensive Christ, who is also known as the Christ the Sufferer. The paintings were created gradually at the turn of the 15th and 16th century. Even though a Gothic groined vault rises above you, it is still possible to see openings in the north wall. These were used for the original beam ceiling. The late Gothic chapel of Saint John the Baptist was built around the year 1440. The chapel is decorated with late Gothic and early Renaissance murals. On the south wall, there is the epitaph of the Olomouc canon Wenceslas of Moštěnice painted there. On the east wall, there is the Annunciation to the Virgin Mary, and on the north wall, there is the Christ who appears to the Virgin Mary after the resurrection. The vault of the chapel is filled with a painting representing angels with the instruments of the Passion of Christ, as well as the Olomouc patron saints and patron saints of the historical lands. Two early Renaissance tombstones have been preserved in the chapel too. You can also admire the sculpture of Christ on the Mount of Olives from the Church of St. Maurice in Olomouc, which is one of the most important sculptures of late Gothic period in Central Europe. Its restoration proved that the figures were once polychrome in a harmony of red, blue, green and white. This was usual at the end of the 14th century. The late Gothic chapel of Saint John the Baptist originally served as the chapel library. This is still reminded to us by the inscriptions on the walls, which are directly behind you. Now we will head to the first floor of the palace. On our way up, we'll come across mason's marks engraved in the column next to the stairway. The Romanesque Episcopal Palace is one of the most important Romanesque residential buildings in Europe. It was built in the 12th century by Bishop Henry Zdík of Olomouc. The Bishop's Palace had the form of two-story building with a rectangular floor plan, and it was one of the most beautiful buildings of its kind, not only in the Czech lands. The ground floor served as a homestead. The first floor, where we are now, was used as a conference venue and as Bishop's private residence. On the walls you can see engravings of animals created by pupils of the chapter school in the 13th century. The game plan for the board game called the Mill also comes from the 13th century. It can be seen on the windowsill. The combined windows are the proof of the high level of Romanesque art and of the refined taste of Henry Zdík. Soft limestone, spongylite, from which they are carved, allowed a rich ornament to decoration. The windows were originally closed by window shutters. Holes for their attachment are still visible in some places. In this corner of the western wall, we can see the remains of a fireplace ledge. After the death of Bishop Zdík, the palace burned down several times. It was never restored to its original form. Instead, Gothic cloister walk we have walked through at the beginning of the tour was built in its place. We are standing here again because we will head to the cloister garth. The cloister garth was built in the 14th century on the site of the defunct Bishop's Palace and the adjacent cloister on the north side of the Cathedral of St. Wenceslas. Today's arrangement with flower beds reminds of its original purpose, a space for prayers and meditation. A significant object here is the stone part of the well with a hand-forged iron grill from the 19th century. Thank you for taking our virtual tour of Zdík's palace. As the palace will be undergoing a reconstruction between 2020 and 2021, take this tour as an invitation to come and see Zdík's palace on your own eyes as soon as possible. Have a nice day and see you at the next tour!